thing about Detroit. Detroit's a team that attacks. Detroit likes to attack the rim. They're not a great shooting team typically. And last night in Cleveland, they shot 12 free throws to 34 for the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell himself made more free throws in the game than Detroit attempted. The foul differential was 27 to 15. Welcome to the NBA playoffs, where the extension of series, especially when the two teams are close, is preferable for everybody involved. All right. Looking forward very much to San Antonio, Minnesota tonight. The Spurs are a 10-point favorite. That seems awfully high. Seems like they're begging you to play Minnesota. So I'd probably play the Spurs personally. So I got this from my guy, Yale. Yale writes all the time. Yale's been a big listener to the show for years. He wrote yesterday, Kevin, you were right. Tom, as in Livero, and people like me were wrong. The ends justified the means. I wasn't on board with any of the tanking over the last few years. I thought it was just more Mayor Ted presiding over Loserville. But congrats on number one. The team is finally worth some attention. I read Yale's email yesterday, and I immediately thought, man, you don't get it. Like, that's not summing up the way I feel after they got number one. You know, it's actually the opposite. My reaction to the Wizards getting the number one pick in the draft. This is not an end. Getting the number one pick overall in the 2026 draft is not the end that has justified the means. That's a completely incomplete way of looking at it. The ending that will justify the means hasn't arrived yet. And by the way, may never arrive. And that got me to thinking about, what, the end result needs to be for the 3 years of tanking to have justified, the result. And look, you'll never get me to change my mind that what they've been doing is the right thing. I have totally been on board since day one with, for a franchise like the Wizards, for whatever reason, they've never been able to attract any sort of decent free agent. They've only been able to trade for really good stars or draft stars. This is the way a Wizards franchise needs to do it. It's borderline small market, even though we're not a small market. And that is to, tear it down and accumulate as many assets as you can, players, young players, picks, etc. But I thought about, after reading Yale's email, trying to define the ending that will come down the road that will justify what we just went through as Wizards fans, the few of us that there are, that will justify the 3 years of tanking, 3 years of being just truly horrendous as a basketball team, as a basketball franchise. 196 losses in 3 years. That's over 65 a year for 3 years. And by the way, it wasn't just losing. At times, the margin of loss was embarrassing. The definition, this is personal, this is subjective, very subjective. You can think about it in any way you want. Sunday was not the end of anything. Sunday is still part of the beginning. I'll get to that in a moment. But the definition of an ending that justifies what they just went through for 3 years, I'll start with this. It's not, for me, it's not necessarily a championship. Those are so hard to come by in the NBA. It's such a hard sport to win a championship in, because you pretty much have to have a top 5 player in the league to get it done. I've gone through that list all the way back to the 2004 Pistons. That's how far you have to go back to find a championship team that didn't have a debatable top 5 player on their roster. So for me, the end, whenever it comes, that will justify the means isn't necessarily a championship. For me, the ending that will justify 3 years of hell is becoming a consistent upper echelon team in the NBA. And I would define that further by saying beginning no later than the year after this upcoming season, the 2027-2028 season. That should be year one where the expectation should be now it's time for the 3 years of losing intentionally to start to pay off. Now, I actually think there's a chance in this upcoming season they could be a decent team. You know, Anthony Davis's health means everything to how good they could be, or how bad they could end up being if he doesn't play that much at all. But I think beginning hopefully no later than the 2027-2028 season, the Wizards have to become a team that consistently finishes in kind of that top 4 to 5 range of the Eastern Conference over a period of several years. I would say a minimum of 5, but more like 7, 8 years, something like that, especially considering how young of a basketball team they have right now roster-wise. So, you know, finishing in that top 4 to 5 over a period of several years with an occasional season in which they make a deep run. I'm not talking about winning a series. I'm talking about winning 2 or 3 series to get to the NBA Finals. Of course, I'd prefer it to be an NBA Finals championship run. But again, you know, there's no guarantee that what they've been doing will produce a top 5 player, and you're pretty much SOL in terms of championships if you don't have one. I personally right now don't think they have a future MVP candidate, a future top 5 player on the roster. Maybe next month we'll change that. We'll see. You know, I think the closest they have to a top 5 player will be Anthony Davis next year. Now, I like a lot of what they have, and I'll get to that in a moment, but defining the end that justifies what we just went through for me is an upper echelon team in the NBA, a perennial playoff team, a perennial top 4 to top 5 seeded Eastern Conference team, an occasional run deep into the postseason, a run to the conference championship, you know, twice, a run to the NBA Finals once. I won a championship as the way to justify the 3 years of tanking, but I'm realistic. If the Wizards become an upper echelon NBA franchise with consistent 45 to 50 plus win seasons, playoffs every year, playoff series wins, legitimately putting teams, you know, season in, season out that are good and can win and occasionally go on a deep run or two, that will justify the means for me. Now, the justification for doing what they're doing, I'm on board, but the end result is not guaranteed. Sunday was a good thing that they got the number 1 pick, and the team has done the first part of this thing well, I think. You know, they've used their horrible records over 3 years to accumulate young talent and a ton of draft picks. On the roster currently, they have 7 players, 7 picked in the first round of the last 3 drafts. 7 first-round picks over the last 3 drafts. They'll obviously add to that in June. Over the next 7 drafts, over the next 7 years, they have 8 first-round picks and 12 second-round picks. They've used picks and players to acquire assets, and assets that have turned into other assets. See Anthony Davis and Trae Young. Now, this is the first draft where the lottery really went their way. The biggest blow was last year when, with the second worst record in the league, in a draft with Cooper Flagg in it, they fell to 5th overall. Now, they got a good player in Trey Johnson, but Cooper Flagg would have been much better. They got a decent spot in the 2024 draft and took Sarr, but it wasn't a great draft as it looks now. I mean, still time for that draft to turn around, but the way it looks now, it wasn't, a top heavy draft. I'd much rather have last year's number 1 and have this year's number 5. But they didn't get that kind of luck, but they got some luck this year. But these 3 years and this last lottery on Sunday, this is part 1. They have 13 players on the roster that are 24 years of age or younger. The next part now comes in trying to figure out whether or not they, the front office, Winger, Dawkins, if they've used all of these picks and roster flexibility to pick the right players for the team. That's TBD at this point. I think there are some intriguing pieces, among all of their young players, in particular the 7 first-round picks over the last 3 years that are currently on the team. I think Sarr is certainly a guy with big upside. I am a big fan of Keyshawn George and Will Riley. I really wanted Trey Johnson in last year's draft, and I think he is a lethal shooter and even a really good scorer and maybe a future all-star. Do I think the superstar top 5 player exists on their roster right now? I do not. Not among the young players. It might be Anthony Davis next year at 33 years old. That's probably their best chance for, sooner rather than later, true sort of top 5, top 10 impact player on the roster. But look, there's one more piece to throw into the mix. It comes next month, and that's the piece, that could potentially be the guy that we say, whoa, in 2 or 3 years, they got it right with this guy. This draft doesn't have a consensus number 1 like last year, or like with Wemby in 23, or with even like Zion Williamson in 2019. But this draft is considered super deep. A trade back could be a possibility. That would be interesting. I don't think they're going to trade the pick. I think it's going to be DeBonsa or Peterson. I do. I think things could change certainly between now and June with due diligence and with interviews. And, they've done a lot of that stuff already, but they could certainly learn more. Sunday wasn't the end of anything. The means have not been justified yet. I believe in what they've been doing, but it is possible that in 4, 5, 6 years, that as a fan of the team, I'll look back and say, yes, there was justification for doing what they did, but it wasn't because of the way it ended. It wasn't because of the results, because there's never been a guarantee with this process that there would be great success at the end of it. They could ultimately prove out to be great at this first part, the accumulation of young talent, lots of picks, but they could also prove out to be not very good at the selection of players and or the development of the players. Time's going to tell on that one. That time is not now. Nobody should be, celebrating or self-congratulating for supporting what they've been doing. I mean, that's almost a given. I mean, personally, I don't get anybody that said, the last 3 years, I don't understand it. This is stupid. No, it's the only way that they had a chance. So the process that they took on, I'm in support of, but there was never a guarantee that that was going to ultimately create an ending that you look back and said, well, justifiable that they did it. I'm a supporter of what they're doing, but what they're doing isn't anywhere near a point in which you can say the ends have justified the means. That can't come until we see if it produces in terms of results. That's not the way to look at it from my standpoint. They are about to complete part 1 or phase 1 with the selection of a player in the 2026 draft. That will conclude phase one. 3 years of losing big, accumulating a significant number of young players with first-round labels, a couple of very high selections in Sarr, and then the player they pick if they don't trade the pick in June. And, the ability to, with roster flexibility and with a ton of assets to be able to acquire a couple of key veterans along the way at a point in which they're ready to try to compete, to win games, not to lose. So we'll see whether or not they're good at picking players and whether or not they're good at developing players. And then, by the way, remember, a big part of this is, did they pick the right guy to lead them on the floor? They're sticking with Brian Keefe. I don't have a problem with them sticking with Brian Keefe. I don't know anything about Brian Keefe as a coach for a team that is trying to win games. Nobody does, because that's not been the goal for 3 years. He's been much more of a developmental coach. Here's the good news in this coming out of phase one after they picked their next player in the 2026 draft. The idea, the concept of shifting towards trying to win games will be a much better developmental space for their young players. We've talked about this a lot. Will Dawkins, I asked him about this. He, talked about it for, 3 minutes about how it is a much better environment, the environment they want to get their young players into. They want to get Carrington and Trey Johnson and Keyshawn George and Will Riley and Bilal Coulibaly, et cetera. They want to get these players into an environment where night in and night out over an 82-game regular season schedule, they're playing teams that come in and take them seriously. They're not playing teams that are coming in and saying, well, this team's tanking. They're not trying to win. We don't even have to take this game that seriously. You want the best from your opponents. You want to be able to look up, at the end of a night and look at the standings and see where you are and understand that, hey, this next game could move us from 7th to 6th out of the play-in. You got to have stakes to develop properly. When there aren't stakes in the games, it's different. You notice things, of course. You can identify whether or not somebody can do it or not, but there is a next step in the development that has to be about winning. I'm looking forward to that. After the show yesterday, I spent some time, and I mentioned yesterday, I don't have a strong lean at this point on number one. I do think, however, there are 4 players that if they stay at number one, the selection should come from. I'll give you that list of 4 players next. So 6 weeks from tonight, the NBA draft, the first round of the NBA draft, June 23rd, will take place in Washington. Is on the clock now, and they'll be on the clock for real 6 weeks from tonight. And if they don't trade the pick, and look, anything's possible. The depth of this draft, without a consensus number one, without that player that, when you win the lottery, it's like, okay, that was a franchise changing lottery result, like it was with Wemby, like it was with, maybe Cooper Flag. We'll see. But over the years, we know the handful of lotteries that have produced a number one where you were like, yeah, well, they get Zion, or they get David Robinson, or they get Patrick, going back to 85 with Patrick Ewing. So this could be a draft in which a trade back might make sense. The DeBonce's people apparently would love to see him play in Utah. Utah's got the second pick in the draft. Well, to move up, it's a little bit different in the NBA in terms of the value of the draft chart. If the draft charts I looked at yesterday are somewhat accurate, I mean, it would probably cost Utah next year's number one, unprotected, to move up to number one, and then the Wizards would get whomever they didn't take. If they took DeBonce, maybe the Wizards like Peterson, maybe the Wizards like Boozer, who knows? So, look, at this point, there's going to be a lot that we don't know. This is going to be a really interesting 6 weeks because there are so many players that are considered to be very, very good players and surefire NBA players. But there isn't a player for sure that is franchise changing. And there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of close calls on a lot of players. It's not going to surprise me if somebody like Caleb Wilson over the next 6 weeks ends up rising to number one. So there are 4 players that I really like for number one. There are lots of players in this draft that I actually really do like that I just don't think are worthy of number one. Like, it's not going to surprise me if Koa Pete from Arizona or Braden Burries, the freshman point guard from Arizona, both of those guys end up being exceptional NBA players. But they're not, worthy of number one based on their college result, based on their measurables, based on the comparative environment that they are in. The 4 players that, and I'm not going to put them in any order, the 4 players that I like the most for number one overall. And let me just mention, these players that I'm going to mention are, my opinion is based on the way they play basketball, not anything else. Because Darren Peterson's missed games during his 1 year in Lawrence at Kansas, and certainly some of the drama around the missed games, I thought in the moment, major red flag when he pulled himself 25, 30 minutes before tip-off against number one Arizona in Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence. I mean, the biggest game of the college basketball season, and he's pulling himself. Doesn't feel well. Sat on the bench throughout the game, watched the whole thing, never really made an attempt to come into the game. There's a lot of that going around on Peterson, as most of you know by now. He only played in 24 games this year. He pulled himself out of games. The game that he went head-to-head with DeBonce in, the BYU-Kansas game, he had a really good first half. Kansas built a big lead. He came out 2.5 minutes into the second half and never came back in with cramps, suffering from, cramps. Now, the cramps could have been creatine induced. That's the story from last week, is he was overtaking creatine, which left him dehydrated, which caused serious cramping. He dealt with a cramping issue. He dealt with an ankle issue. There was a lot of issues going on there. He's a young kid, too. I mean, this does not mean this is who he is. This is where, the Wingers and the Dawkinses of the world, this is why they get paid the big bucks, because Peterson is a pretty compelling player to watch. So the 4-player list that I'm going to give you that I think is that any one of these four players pick number one would be worthy is not in any order, and it does not take into consideration any of the personal stuff. It's just when I watched them play college basketball this past season, I thought that they were really, really good and projected at the next level as really, really good. AJ DeBonce is one. I mentioned this yesterday that DeBonce was the opposite of Peterson. Like they couldn't take him off the floor. He played 6 games from mid-February on where he played in all 40 minutes or plus. They had an overtime game against Colorado in which he played 43 minutes. 6 games not coming out. Now, in that overtime game, 43 minutes meant that he came out. Maybe he fouled out. I don't know. I'd have to go look at the box score from that game. But this dude you couldn't keep off the floor. He's a hooper. He loves playing basketball, and he can really score. He can score in a lot of ways. First of all, the height at 6'9", somewhere around there, and the wingspan super long. He shoots over you. He can drive by you. He's got a great pull-up mid-range game. He finishes at the rim. Everything about watching A.J. DeBonce screams, well, this guy's going to be a big-time scorer at the NBA level. Will he be a great defender at the NBA level? It's hard to tell with 19-year-olds, even when they're not shut-down defenders in college, because they physically mature, and it becomes different for, as they physically and mentally mature. He's 19 years old. Ended up at BYU, got paid a bundle to go to BYU. Got offered a bundle by a lot of places, chose BYU, and BYU had a decent season. They got to the tournament. They lost to Texas, who won one of those first 4 games to advance to the main draw where they played BYU in a round of 64 game, and Texas won that game 79-71. DeBonce did not come out of the game. He scored 35 points. This was a guy who averaged 25 and a half a game. He shot 51% overall field goal wise, 33.1% from behind the arc. The stroke is there. The mechanics are there. I'm not worried about him, becoming anything other than an absolute threat from any level offensively on the floor. Shot 77.5% from the free throw line, averaged 6.8 rebounds, 3.7 assists. He sees the floor, good vision, great handle for somebody that size. Does he turn into a great two-way player with that wingspan at 6'9"? Will he turn into a really good defender? I don't know, but he's definitely an NBA scorer. Number 2 is Darren Peterson. If you watched him play, forget about all the other stuff. I'm not considering that right now. Just one of the more effortless scorers that we've seen in college basketball in a long time. Now, we didn't get to see a lot of Darren Peterson. He played in 24 games, and in some of those games, he didn't play a lot. Pulled himself from that second half of the BYU game, or most of the second half, ended up playing just 20 minutes in that game. BYU made a run back into that game. They were down 20 at half. They made a run back into it, and he didn't budge from his seat on the bench. After he went for, by the way, 18 points in the first half. Effortless 18. 6 of 8 from the floor, 3 for 5 from behind the arc, 3 for 4 from the free throw line. This guy is fun to watch. There's a uniqueness for me, and I think most of you, those of you that love basketball, when you see somebody that is it looks like they're barely trying to score. I've used the word methodical, and when John Wall came on with me on Friday and we played some of that for you yesterday, he used the same word. I love, the patience. You can't speed him up. He's methodical. He gets to his spot. The 24-second clock never, will bother him. The 30-second shot clock in college didn't bother him. He's at 6'6". He can shoot over smaller guards. He's really good at creating space to get it off against guys his size or bigger. He can drive it. He can finish it. He's an excellent passer. I think he's got some real defensive talent, too. There were games, I'm looking through it right now. What did he average steals for the year? Because there were a couple of games where he averaged a steal and a half a game. He really anticipates as an off-ball defender, gets into passing lanes. He had 4 blocked shots in the second round loss in the tournament to St. John's. And I will say in the 2 games in the tournament, 37 minutes, 36 minutes, had 28 in the opener against the California Baptist team that they beat by 8, and then they faced St. John's, and St. John's full court press the entire game. It really was kind of a messy game, but they ended up covering. I remember that very distinctly. He had 21 points, 4 rebounds, 4 block shots in that game. So there is certainly this. I've mentioned the names. You know him, DeMar DeRozan. Watch him play. No one will ever speed him up. No one's ever sped up Kawhi. Nobody speeds up SGA. That's the style of player that he is. It's going to be a guy that ends up being a really good NBA player. I don't know if I see a future MVP candidate in Darren Peterson. But then again, I didn't see enough of Darren Peterson. I mean, they had that stretch where they were playing, top 3, number 1 team, the number 2 team number 1 team in Arizona, the number 2 team in Iowa State, the BYU's in the top 15, the Texas Tech's in the top 15, Houston, was a top 5 team. The 2 games against Arizona, the 1 game against Arizona when Arizona came in he played at the game. He didn't play in the game at home in which they lost to Arizona, and did play in the game on the road against Arizona later in the season when Arizona was number 2 and they got blown out. He played in that game though. That's the problem. There's, he played, he just didn't play enough, but you can see it. You can see why people are excited about it. The other 2 players that I really like a lot, I do like Caleb Wilson a lot. He broke his thumb late in the season, cost him the last month of the regular season or the last 3 weeks of the regular season and then the entirety of the postseason. But this guy at 6'10-ish, 215 and young and still growing and will fill out. He is a relentless rebounder, defender. He can score. There were games, you go back to even early in the season as a super young player against Ohio State. He had 20 and 15 in 34 minutes. He had a game against Florida State at home, conference game, early in the conference season, 22 and 16. 22 and 16 in 36 minutes of a college game is pretty impressive. Against some of the real good opponents, he was huge. They won a game at UVA when UVA was on a roll. I mean, Virginia was rolling. They were ranked 13th, 12th in the country at that point. They went into John Paul Jones, and Carolina won that game 85-80, had 20 on 8 of 12 from the floor. Had a couple of blocks, had a couple of steals. Yeah, he is, and then they beat Duke in that game in which Cam Boozer had a difficult time closing at the rim in the second half. Carolina rallied. They beat Duke in the first of 2 against Duke. This was the one in the Dean Dome in Chapel Hill. He had 23 in that game on 8 of 12 from the floor, played all 40 minutes. That would end up being his next to last game of the year. Caleb Wilson is really interesting. I've seen the comparisons to Kevin Garnett. I think he might actually at this age have better offensive skills. We'll see. And then the 4th player that I absolutely think would be worthy of going number 1 overall, and people will disagree, that's fine. But I mentioned this guy, the show following a night in which he went for 49 points in a double overtime loss in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. And that's Darius Acuff Jr. marveled at the way, first of all, he scored that night against Alabama on the road in maybe one of the games of the year, 117, 115 in double overtime. He couldn't miss from behind the arc. I think he was 6 for 9, like 16 of 26 or something like that from the floor. I don't think he missed a free throw. He had 49. He did miss a shot and a free throw late that would have put him over 50 and perhaps would have won the game. And I'm like, a freshman point guard going for 49 in a game. And the way he did it, he's physically mature already. Now, he's going to get knocked for his size, and let's see where he comes in. Measurables. He was listed at 6'3". Some people say he may only be 6'1.5", 6'2". That is an issue, perhaps, but I don't see any way, barring injury, that Darius Acuff Jr., who in the SEC this year averaged 23.5 points per game, averaged 6.5 assists per game. He really sees the floor well. He is a devastating scorer and shooter. He's physically mature. I don't see any way that in 4 or 5 years, unless, there are mental or personal things that get in the way or physical injuries, that he's not a 26, 27, 28 point per night scorer. Dame Lillard was the comparison for me the night that they lost to Alabama in double overtime. In the tournament, in their 3 games, they got to the Sweet 16, and they got hammered by Arizona, man. Hammered. Arizona was a better team. But in the 3 tournament games, he averaged 29.3 points per game, 5.3 assists per game. Shot 38% from behind the arc, 84% from the free throw line, and 46.7% from the field in 3 tournament games. Had 24 in the opener against Hawaii. That was a blowout win. They beat High Point. Remember, High Point pulled off a first-round upset. They beat them in the second round. He had 36 in that game. And then against Arizona, they did get after him a little bit in that game. He ended up with 28, but it was not a great performance from him in a blowout loss. But to me, that guy, and look, if he's not going to be the number 1 pick, maybe if the Wizards fell in love with him, that could be a guy that they trade back and take. I know people will say, well, they added Trae Young. And I would say, so what? This draft is about picking the player that you think has the best chance 5, 6, 7 years down the road of being a legitimate MVP candidate, a legitimate top 5 player. This draft at this level is about picking players with high ceilings. It's not about finding the best player available to fit the roster that you have now. Anthony Davis and Trae Young are not going to be on the roster 5, 6, 7 years down the road when the player that they pick in June ends up being 25 years old, 26 years old, and entering, those prime years or right in the middle of them where they have reached their peak and they are hopefully legitimately superstar, results-wise. Acuff Jr., he does not defend. He's not even interested in defending. But the way the game's played today, Brunson's not interested in defending either. Luka's not interested in defending. A lot of those scoring backcourt players, they get targeted on defense. But they're also giving you 27 a night. I've got a what do you got with NFL breaking schedule information when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. All right, more league and league network partner announcements on the schedule that will be out in its entirety on Thursday night. But as I mentioned last week, we knew that some of this stuff would start to come out beginning yesterday. There was some stuff out over the weekend. We don't know if some of that will be true or not. What we do know to be true at this point, with the latest announcement by ESPN, that announcement is that the opening Monday night game of the year will be Broncos Chiefs, although there's no location yet set for that. But we now have in week one, we know 49ers, Rams, and Melbourne on Thursday night, September 10th, following the Seahawks opening up the season at home against somebody. We now know that Dallas will face the Giants on Sunday Night Football in week one. And we now know that the Broncos and the Chiefs will be the Monday Night Football opener, the final game of week one. No Monday Night Football doubleheaders in 2026. They have eliminated the doubleheaders or the two games in one night. Sometimes very often they weren't true doubleheaders. They were staggered start kickoffs. So Broncos Chiefs, I would assume that the schedule makers, have a really good feel for Patrick Mahomes being back by week one to put the Chiefs into that spot against the defending AFC champions. And then we know now that the Buffalo Bills will have their home opener in their new stadium in Orchard Park, a new stadium, which, by the way, I found out late last night. I didn't know this before. Max, did you know this? That the new Buffalo Stadium is going to be a grass field?
I guess they're just going to have it like a greenhouse up there because it's going to be really hard to keep that in the winter.
Right, but it's apparently grass. The stadium's kind of almost across the parking lot from the old one. The upper level seats are apparently covered with the design of the stadium, but weather will be a factor. It's not an indoor stadium. There's no retractable roof. Buffalo will open up. They will christen their new stadium in Orchard Park in the first Thursday night game of the year that isn't the opening game of the year with Seattle on Thursday night, September 17th, to kick off week two at home against the Detroit Lions. By the way, fun fact to know and tell, when the Buffalo Bills opened up the stadium that they've been in for, believe it or not, 54 years, they opened up the stadium that they've played in for the last 54 years against the Washington Redskins in a preseason game in 1972. Lions at Bills week two, that's been confirmed. And then since we did the show yesterday, the Cowboys-Eagles on Thanksgiving Day was confirmed. So that doesn't eliminate Washington from playing on Thanksgiving Day, even though they don't play the Lions, and now they're not playing the Cowboys. They could play the Thanksgiving night game. They've done that before. They did it in 2017 against the Giants. But more likely than not, that probably eliminates Washington from Thanksgiving Day. The Eagles at Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, 4:30 on Fox. So those are the games that we know of as of now. Seattle to open up the season on Wednesday night, September 9th. 49ers, Rams in Melbourne, Australia, September 10th. Cowboys, Giants, Sunday Night Football, week one. Bills, Lions in Buffalo, the Thursday night game to kick off week two. Week one also finishes up with Denver, Kansas City on Monday Night Football. And then we know that Dallas will host a Thanksgiving Day game against the Philadelphia Eagles. There could be more games coming today that are released. Lots of rumors. Don't believe a lot of this NFL schedule has become almost like the draft in terms of leaks and in terms of the difference is, these leaks a lot of times are just totally made up by people looking to get some views, looking to get some retweets. And so I would suggest that you follow certainly the major outlets that are going to tell you. NFL.com is going to tell you what's officially been released. There's this one X account that I follow, this guy, NFL Nerd. Yes, he is that, and he's a big time schedule nerd. He seems to get a lot of it right and won't release all of the rumors that are out there. But that's what we have so far. Tomorrow we will get all of the international games, and we'll get a few more as well, probably some Netflix games, and YouTube games. And we'll know for sure probably this time tomorrow when Washington plays in London and who they play in London. Now, there was some travel company releases over the weekend that indicate that Washington's going to play on October 4th. That's exactly what I mocked, so I hope that's right. But we'll find out for sure at least one Washington game before the actual schedule comes out Thursday night. We'll find that out tomorrow with the London game release. All right. When we come back, Randolph Childress will weigh in. I love Randolph's sharp opinion on basketball. He'll weigh in on the Wizards getting number one. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Joining me right now is Randolph Childress. Randolph was an unbelievable college basketball player at Wake Forest in the 90s, played in the NBA for 4 or 5 years, was the 19th pick in the first round of the 1995 draft. That was the draft where Maryland's Joe Smith went number 1 overall. Randolph's been calling games and doing a lot of college basketball work for ESPN over the last couple of years, and I love having him on the show. His insight has been great when we've had him on previously. On X, at R22 Childress, give him a follow. So let's start with this. Are you a believer, like many are, that there's not really a consensus number one? Or is there a player that you actually like as a consensus number one?
I think it's going to be one or two players. I think it's going to be A.J. DeBonzo. It's going to be Darren Peterson. And I probably would think for the way the Wizards team is constructed right now, it's probably to be A.J. DeBonzo being the number one pick. And, you know, already having Trae Young and Anthony Davis there in fold, I think they will probably be leaning there. But again, I think they're going to do more homework and do a little bit of a deeper dive in some of the issues and concerns that we've heard about with Darren Peterson.
Did you call any of the games involving either one of those two players this year? Because you had mostly ACC games, right?
Yeah, I've been at events where they've been in the tournament. I was there, so I've watched them in person. I don't think they can go wrong with either pick. I'm happy for the organization. I think you get some luck from time to time. You know, they had the number one pick when they taken Alex Sarr, who's more of a defensive player. I think he's rounding into shape. He's getting better and better. And now you get the number one pick in this year's draft with the veterans that you've accumulated in trades this offseason. I think you should be excited if you're a Washington Wizards fan, because I think the playoffs are more of a realistic opportunity now.
So you, like a lot of people, think that number one will come from the small group of either DeBonza or Peterson. But is there another player, Randolph, that you really, really like? Like if I told you that actually, 6 weeks from tomorrow night, it was another player, not one of those two players, that got picked number one overall, who do you think that player, or from a group of players, it would be?
I like the next two. I like Cam Boozer and I like Caleb Wilson. I think Cam Boozer gets – people have been very negative about the athleticism and finding ways to denigrate his game, where all he does is win. And there has to be some value in that. And when ultimately that's why you play the sport. He's won everywhere he's been. And I can tell you one thing, he was the most dominant player in college basketball a year ago. And I don't think that was debatable. There was a lot of good talent. Everyone talks about the depth and how much quality is in this draft. Cam Boozer was the most dominant player in college basketball a year ago. And he's won everywhere. You're talking 4 state high school championships, 3 EYBL championships, and you're talking about a Final Four. I know it's disappointing that the way they lost Elite Eight, they lost to UConn in the Final Four. I'm sorry, but to lose a game like that they very easily could have won,
should have
been in the Final Four with an opportunity to win. It just shows you that all they do is win. It doesn't have to be flashy. They just win, and there's a lot of players that have had a lot of that had a lot of success and won a lot of basketball games, not being very flashy. And I'm big on Cam Boozer, and again for those reasons, for an organization that has struggled lately with just doing that, and that's winning games. So I am a big fan of his, and I'm also a big fan of Caleb Wilson's. I've seen him call his games. I think he can be a really elite defensive player in that league. I don't know, again, because of that. I spoke of the other two guys, meaning Darren Peterson and A.J. DeBonza, because I think you have size on the Wizards, in their frontline guys. I don't know if you're going to pair him up with an Anthony Davis, with Caleb Wilson kind of falls into that 6'10", 6'11" athletic guy that you already have. So, but I think his upside is there. He's not a great jump shooter, but his mechanics are fine. I think that part of his game is coming. Does everything else well, handles it, passes it. And again, he's probably the most versatile defender of those top prospects.
On Boozer, like if you were the GM and you're picking number one, are you picking the guy with the biggest ceiling, or does that matter to you? Because, Boozer has been described, and I don't know that this is such a harsh critique, but he's been described as having a super high floor, but not as high of a ceiling as some of those other players. Do you believe that? And is that important to you if you're picking number one overall, trying to find the next true superstar in the game?
I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. I think something has to be said with winning. And I think there's a lot of players in the history of the sport who get undervalued because they're not sexy in the sense of their athleticism. And one of my closest friends, I think, gets, I'd say in the all-time great list, I think he drops only because he's not flashy. And I'm talking about my former teammate in Tim Duncan. I think he's a guy. He's not flashy. And again, I'm not saying Cam Boozer is him, but I'm speaking of just the lack of athleticism. The same things that you would say then about Cam in that aspect, or some of the things you would say about Tim in the sense of he's not an athletic guy. If you were making comparisons, and I would go back to that time frame with Tim, you would say Caleb Wilson is more like a Kevin Garnett, and Boozer's more like a Duncan.
Interesting.
With the how you from the athleticism of their games, not their games, but in athleticism and measurables and all those types of things, and how they play the game. That would be the comp, and so that's what I mean when I say winning matters, and that's all Cam Boozer has ever done is won. So if you're looking for style points and the wow factor and things of that nature, then you're probably going to look at Caleb Wilson and say that. But there's no refuting who was the best and most dominant player in college basketball a year ago, and that was Cam Boozer.
I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that I think about when I watched Boozer this year, and I ended up in my own mind using Tyler Hansbrough as a comp, and you may think that that's harsh, even though Hansbrough was the best player in the college game. I mean, he was hands down the best player in college basketball. But there was something about Hansbrough at the college level that I think is similar to what I saw with Boozer, and that is they couldn't finish consistently in the paint. And if you can't do that at the college level, how do you do it at the NBA level? You'd have to remind me. I mean, I watched all of Duncan's games, or a lot of them, but you played with him. I don't remember Duncan having that issue in college.
I think he was a little bit more polished with his back to the basket.
Fair.
I think some of the problems that Cam Boozer had is I don't think this is one of the more talented teams that Duke has had.
Okay.
I thought he was that dominant. And he gets fun. When you take into consideration of what he did, he followed up Cooper Flagg, because that Duke team a year ago was legit. I mean, it was special in a sense. It was an elite. That team was elite defensively on all three levels. It had shooting, it had all the size, it had the rim protection with Malawash. When you flip that to this year, I mean, that team, Tom Knipple was the second guy offensively, and we saw what type of season he had as a rookie. He and Cooper Flagg were basically rookies of the year. Duke this year struggled to find a second guy. There was no consistent second scorer. And when you look at their three losses on the year, they were all losses where I don't blame Cam Boozer for that. I think I blame guard play. More importantly, I blame point guard play in a sense of that. They were up 15 points in all of their losses, going back to even Houston a year ago.
Right.
So they've been up big in these games. They couldn't close games that, and that's just a bias in me as guards. I look for guards to help do that and close games. But again, I think the responsibility that he had was so much, and I think he wore down at times. But I think he can finish. He shoots it better than people give him credit for. I think he had so much on his plate at Duke, unlike teams that they had in the past. And I thought he had a heck of a year, and I thought he had a great year. And there are times he has struggled finishing at the rim. But I think if you were to analyze all of these draft picks, you're going to find something about him that all of these guys where they struggled. You're going to say A.J. DeBanza doesn't shoot it great. His shot selection isn't great. We all know the things about Darren Peace, and when it comes to the guards of Darius Acuff, as dynamic as he is, his size, and you've heard some of the defensive complaints about him. And Caleb Wilson, will he be able? What's his range like? Will he be able to consistently find that? And that's why I say, for an organization like the Wizards right now, you have to win. You need, you fortunate enough, you had the Alex Sarr pick at number 1. You've got your guys back. You've had the offseason. The reward for tanking, you've been rewarded for it. You get the number 1 pick, and you get to add a piece to that group that you have, hoping that those guys can be healthy, with Trae Young and Anthony Davis. And you got a chance to get one of those 2 players, I think, who has the highest ceiling, because you don't have to put the entire franchise on their back. There's enough talent and great players there to make the game easier for them, provided they stay healthy. If not, then you're going to find your rookie in the same situation where Cooper Flag was in this year with the Mavericks.
You just brought up a player that I love, Darius Acuff Jr. Like, to me, I've been saying for the last 2 months, I know he's not interested in guarding anybody. I understand that. I can see that.
Right.
But he looks like Damian Lillard as a scorer. But you know what? Actually, there's some comparisons to you as a college scorer. I mean, I'm guessing you're both around the same size. Now, he's physically mature, don't you think, as a college player?
I think he is.
Yeah. But in terms of being a scorer at that point guard position and just being really lethal as a scorer, there's some comparisons to you in college.
He's far more physically ready than I was coming out of that.
Yep.
I mean, he is a grown man. His
Yeah.
body, he's ready. I think this when it comes to Darius Acuff. My only concern is just the measurables. I don't have the worries that everyone else has. My only concern is legitimate size with guys. And it's not just him. I've said that when we get past the 4th pick, that's what I'm wondering. I think the size and measurables of these guys are going to matter when you start talking about Darius Acuff and Kingston Flemings and Michael Brown Jr. and Keaton Wagler. I think you want to look at it and go, all right, is Wagler legitimately 6'6"? Because if he's a legit 6'6" and you feel comfortable that he can be a point guard, that's different. And then what happens if Darius Acuff check out and he's 6'1.5"? Is it
right?
And those things, and that's the only thing that I worry about. I question with these guys is when you get them in the combine and you get their legit measurables. We've seen them play. There's no question, there's no doubt about these guys' ability. And I agree with you. I think physically he's ready. The physicality, I think that's what separates Darius Acuff over the other guards. I think the Wagler, Michael Brown, and Kingston Fleming will have more time adjusting to the physicality than he will.
Yeah, like in watching Acuff score at the college level, he looks like a guy that 5 years from now is going to be a 26, 27 point a night guy. To me, does he look that to you?
I know he could be like a maxi kid, just coming in right there and giving the right opportunity. Just come in and you're going to look up, and he's going to be. There's no doubt in my mind he can average 20 points a game and play, provided given the opportunity. And putting the ball in his hands and allowing him to play. And so much of that depends on the situation where these guys are getting drafted to, and obviously who's there. But I'm a big fan of his. I think he's going to be a stud. I mean, the depth of this draft, and like I said, all those guys. I'm a big Kingston Fleming fan, a huge Michael Brown fan. I'm excited to see, just like these teams. I think if you're a team and you're kicking the tires on all these guys, you want to lay eyes on them. You want to see their actual measurables, because I think that'll start when people start finalizing their boards of where they are. I think that's going to be a big part of what they're looking for.
It's a really good point. I think a lot of the interview stuff, a lot of the due diligence stuff between now and the draft will be super critical, and I don't think any more so than with a player like Darren Peterson. So let's end our draft talk with your thoughts on Peterson and what would concern you, if anything.
I think once my doctor signed off on everything, I think I'd be okay with it. I thought that situation was just poorly managed by everybody involved.
Yeah.
Kansas, his family, and how everybody put the information out. And I think the storyline with that, you allowed the media and people in the media to come up with their own perception and just storylines. And it took way too long to come out. I think imagine what would have happened if they had come out and just said, hey, he was hospitalized and we're trying to figure out why.
Exactly.
Cramping.
Exactly.
If you just say that,
right,
the narrative completely changes and we don't have this sour taste in our mouth about, or these concerns about who he is and questioning his character and everything about his family. I think that's on everybody involved. No matter what was going on, I just thought that was just poorly handled. And I think that's what's hurting that young man right now. But family-wise, you can imagine. I posed this to someone early when I said this about him. If that was our son, if that was your son or my son, and he was going through something and it's this close to being what he has become, how would we have handled it?
Yeah, I think that there was an honesty opportunity, for the school and for everybody around him, and they turned it into a bigger mystery than maybe it needed to be. But there's still a lot. There's still a lot going on. We don't know for sure. I mean, the creatine story came out the other day. We know that he was hospitalized in September with terrible cramping from dehydration. He felt like he was in a hospital room, thought he might die. I mean, there's he may have been that may have been a traumatic event that he had to deal with the entire year. Who knows? Let me ask you about his game. He's got a very unique game. Like, it's very methodical. It's very patient. What is he at the next level? If everything checks out doctor-wise and everything else, is he a superstar? Does he have the same opportunity to become a future top 5, perennial all-star, top 5-ish kind of a player in the NBA as DeBonce or any of the other players do?
Absolutely he is. Absolutely he is. Because you're talking about a 6'6" guy with the flexibility in game-wise where he can be your point. He can be and at that size, he can be your off-on. But if you put that guy and you put the ball in his hands at that position, I think it changes things. He still has some growth he has to do as a point guard, but he can flat out score at an efficient level. And he still shot over 30% from behind the 3-point line this past year. With him just being in and out of the lineup, I don't think we've seen, even him averaging 20 points a game last year, we didn't see his best basketball. We didn't see the best version of him. If you saw him prior to that, he was challenging Cam Boozer for the best player. Like, that was the conversation that he was in, and we all know how dominant Cam Boozer is. And so that was the only thing I think that hurt him, is that I felt bad as a fan not being able to see the player that as good as he was. And again, he was still really, really good when he was out, but we never saw him reach his full potential. And I think if he gets to the right situation, the right organization, he'll be able to do that. But he can be a really efficient scorer at his size. I mean, he just does it. He makes it look really, really easy because he can score it at every level. He can get his shot off against anybody. There's just not a lot of guys at that size and can do play the game the way he plays, and you can't speed him up. He just controls the pace of the game how he wants to play. He's a really gifted scorer and a really gifted player. I think I'm excited for him. Always hope for everyone they go to the right situation, but for him, he has the game where it doesn't matter. He's going to be an efficient scorer, provided, obviously, I think the NBA teams will be fine. They'll get all the medical things checked out and get him everything. But he is a dynamic, terrific, exciting player.
What is it about guys like him, Randolph, that, the DeMar DeRozans, the SGAs, the Kawhi Leonards, the guys that are just so incredibly methodical, patient, like they never get sped up. It's impossible to speed them up. There's a 24-second shot clock. They play like there's like no shot clock, and they're able to get to their spots. They're able to score. I don't know what it is about those style of players that I love watching, because most players aren't that way. But why are they effective playing that way?
Because you can't teach it, right? You can't teach that. And then when you're playing against that, it's like playing against a really, really smart chess player. And that's how those guys you just mentioned, it's how they play the game. The high IQ, and they know that you just can't speed them up. And it's a great analogy on your part saying those names, because that's true. And that's how these guys approach it. And he will be no different. He's just going to be an efficient, effective scorer when he gets out there. He's going to know, hey, you want to do this? Okay, you can take this away. All right, I can do that. That's what makes him so special. It's like a lot of guys, you can say, hey, he wants to do this. We got to take this away. And if we do, he'll struggle. He has the talent that what are you going to take away? You can't take it all away. He can create his own shot. At 6'6", he's going to elevate over smaller guards to get his shot off. He's crafty enough with the ball. He plays in ball screens. He plays off screens. He's just comfortable with or without the ball. He's a plug-and-play guy. Whatever opportunity that presents itself, hey, you got a dominant ball handler. If the Wizards wanted to put him alongside of Trae Young, okay, put the ball in his hands and allow Trae Young to play off the ball. They can do that as well and get them in their offense. So he's a really, really talented player that I'm pretty sure the Wizards will do their homework on and find everything out. I think if he checks all the boxes, he would very well be in play for the number one pick. I think it's those three guys that they're really spend the most of their time looking at is AJ, Darren Peterson, and Cam Boozer.
At R22 Childress on X, Randolph's done a great job calling games in college all year long, and follow him. And I appreciate the time as always. Appreciate the insight. Man.
Anytime. Appreciate the time.
Randolph Childress, everybody. I like him a lot. Does a really good job calling games. Really good feel for in-game, what's going on, strategy, etc. Good job by Randolph Childress. He's been on with us now, I don't know, 3 or 4 times during this last basketball season. Let's switch the subject to football. And I want you to answer the question, why didn't Adam Peters and the front office do fill in the blank? I got a couple of them from this past offseason. Why didn't Adam Peters and then fill in the blank during the offseason? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Why didn't Adam Peters, and then you fill in the blank, during the offseason so far? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Shifting the conversation after, I don't know, 3 hours yesterday for the most part, and an hour and a half today on the Wizards. The most, I think, Wizards conversation in a long time. And it's exciting that they've got the number one pick in the upcoming draft. I got this from Eric on Twitter. Kevin really spent the last year running a full FBI investigation on Peterson, as in Darren Peterson's knees at Kansas. Every week it was too risky, can't build around injury concerns, and I wouldn't take him top 3. But now that the Wizards have the number 1 pick, Kevin is changing his story and isn't as concerned with his injury. Stop changing your story. That was funny, Eric. Yeah, actually, it wasn't an FBI investigation on his knees. His knees were never the issue. It was a lot of other things. And yeah, I talked about red flags all over Peterson during the regular season. But when I just mentioned him as a potential top pick, I was specific to say this is based on the player and how he played in college, not any of the personal stuff. Because the truth is, between now and June 23rd, Tuesday night, June 23rd, 6 weeks from tonight, we're not going to know what these teams learn about these players or what they already know about these players. We can only judge based on the kind of players they were. I think there's a lot of, mystery, and almost too much mystery. I said it during the regular season, and you heard Randolph Childress say the same thing. I thought Kansas handled it poorly. They could have easily just come out and protected the player and protected the player's future reputation by saying, look, he had an incident where he had severe cramping. He was in the hospital, required intravenous fluids, which is true, in September. We're still trying to find out what it is that, is the problem. And his overall health is the number one priority here. He'd be playing if it were up to him, really give him credit for trying to push through. But, end the mystery around, a game in which you're getting ready to sit down to watch number 1 versus number 12 from Allen Fieldhouse. And then you find out 20 minutes before tip, the best player for Kansas is out because of cramping. That was funny, Eric, though. But yeah, I think he's deserving of the top pick based on performance, for sure. But there's a lot that will go into the decision-making on that. All right, so, Max, I want you to answer this question as well. Phone lines open, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The question being, why didn't Adam Peters, and then fill in the blank, this offseason? So the easy answer would obviously be, why didn't Adam Peters add another wide receiver at this point? But they tried with Alec Pierce. They tried with Romeo Dobbs. So I'm not knocking him for that quite yet, because it's not over yet, as we know, with Brandon Ayuk still out there and some others out there as well. For me, here's the answer. Why didn't Adam Peters just go all in on Tyler Linderbaum, regardless of the price? Forget the position. There was a need, certainly a perceived need. Although I have learned, over the last week and a half, and I shared this with you guys last week or the week before, that they actually feel pretty confident in Allegretti, and Allegretti's communication skills are actually better than Tyler Biadasz's. But I would have said, forget the position and focus in on how good of a player this is. Tyler Linderbaum is a really good interior offensive lineman. He is exceptional and plays the center position at a very high level. It was probably another, $4 or $5 million a year, $3 or $4 million a year than they were willing to offer. With all of their cap space, they proved last year with Javon Kinlaw in particular that, overpaying the market, which it was perceived and reported as overpaying the market, but they really liked the player. They needed edge setters more than they needed interior guys last year, but they really liked Kinlaw, the player. They signed the player and perhaps overpaid the market for him. So for me, it's why didn't Adam Peters just pay the extra $3 or $4 million a year and beat out the Raiders' offer on Tyler Linderbaum, knowing that they'd be adding not just their starting center and a very good one, but a guy that could potentially be their best offensive lineman. You know, that's one that you don't want to crazily overpay the market. You don't want to set those precedents. But if you're going to do it for a great player. Do it for the player more than even the position. And make sure that that offensive line now has Laramie Tunsil, Sam Cosmi, and Tyler Linderbaum as 3/5 of it. Pretty impressive. Why didn't Adam Peters, you fill in the blank, 301-230-0980. Max, what's your question? Oh, what's your answer to this question?
Well, funnily enough, I was thinking about the center position as well when kind of kicking this one around. But since you've already kind of touched on it, the kicker position, I think they've done in the draft. I mean, signing the kid out of Iowa, I think is going to be an interesting kind of thing. But also like corner depth has kind of been a big thing. So there's that as well. People have kind of just a bunch of questions about Amik Robertson and Witherspoon, just, and their ability to stay healthy, stay on the field and keep things going. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning right now is corner and kicker, two weird spots.
All right. By the way, the Tyler Linderbaum contract, because I don't think I stated it, was 3 years, $81 million. By the way, $81 million guaranteed. That was a big part of the surprise. Not only the $27 million per year average salary, but that it was guaranteed. Total guaranteed $81 million for a center. All-time number one contract for a center. I don't know what Washington offered. The projections before free agency began was this guy was going to get in the 20 to 21 million average annual salary. And the Raiders blew that out of the water. But Washington had the cap space. They clearly liked the player. The player would be a massive upgrade over what they had, would solve a problem. But more importantly, if you just focus on the player, he'd become, with Tunsil, the best lineman on the team. You'd upgrade that offensive line significantly, and you could afford it. I think that's one in which if Allegretti doesn't work out and they don't have an answer there, and that becomes an issue, they'd love to go back to, March 14th or whatever date that was and say, yeah, we'll give you $84 million in guaranteed money, an extra $1 million per year. We'll pay you $28 million a year. We like the player that much, because it's my understanding that they really liked the player. A lot of people really liked the player. They think he is an outstanding interior offensive lineman who happens to play center. All right. Why didn't, Adam Peters fill in the blank during this offseason? 301-230-0980. Let's start with our guy Anthony in DC. Anthony, go ahead.
So just a point of contention with the Linderbaum thing. The reason he got that money is because there was no other center out there to compete with him.
Yeah,
there's nobody
that's true.
Else close to his level.
But also because he's a very good player. The perception, the reality around the league is that they think Tyler Linderbaum is an absolute stud as an interior offensive lineman and center. I mean, he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, and he's 25 years old, something like that. So he's entering his prime.
His quality of play goes without saying, but
yeah,
there was nobody close to his level.
That's right.
To offer to lower the market. As far as what they didn't do, I still think they should have signed a better quality second receiver.
Right.
I mean, at this point, we're nitpicking over positions: receiver, center, corner, safety. Pick your poison. But either one of those positions, they should have come up with a better quality player in my opinion.
You know, so, I went back before thinking about this segment before the show this morning, Anthony, and I thought about some of the, receivers that were out there that signed, decent deals. We know about Pierce and Dobbs, right? Sheehan ended up staying. Sheehan would have been a good one. I was actually advocating pre-free agency to consider somebody like Wan'Dale Robinson to go with a Jawan Jennings. Now, Jennings just got signed to a one-year deal and was not anywhere near in the ballpark that he thought he would get. Remember, Wan'Dale Robinson signed a 4-year, $70 million deal with Tennessee. His deal is actually the second biggest deal in free agency for a receiver behind Alec Pierce. I liked the guy Jalen Naylor from Minnesota who signed with the Raiders. There was somebody else we talked about. Where's my list before free agency?
When you think about it, the old adage plays true. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And they got all the money in the world, and they want to be. I'm trying not to.
They tried for Dobbs and Pierce. Wan'Dale Robinson obviously wasn't a target. Sheehan, I think, was always going to stay in Seattle. Guys like Naylor and Evans and Hollywood Brown and Christian Kirk, Darnell Mooney, those were the guys that essentially, were the second tiers. And then you got into probably low second tier, high third tier in guys like Diami, and then Van Jefferson, after that. Yeah. We still think they're not done there yet, though. And I think
one last thing before I go, if you let me go to basketball real quick, because who knows when you do another basketball calling.
Stop.
So we know we don't know who these players are going to be. When you look at recent history, Grant Hill was anointed, Ralph Sampson was anointed, and LeBron was anointed. Now, LeBron and Grant Hill lived up to the expectation, in my opinion. Grant Hill was that dude before he got injured. So everybody else, we didn't think Jordan was going to be what Jordan became. So the player that might be the man might be out there, but we don't know until they get to the league.
Of course. I mean, Giannis, Kawhi Leonard, Joker. Yeah. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, the next great superstar, more likely than not, won't be the number one player picked.
Oh, you were saying in the sense of number one player, not in the draft overall. Okay, I misunderstood you.
No, well, hold on. I think what you just said, I agree with you, and that is that out of this draft, the player that ends up becoming the best player out of this draft, more likely than not, won't be the first player picked. I agree with that. That's what the history says.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I misunderstood you. My
yep.
bad.
No worries. Let's go to Ross in Tampa. Ross, fill in the blank. Why didn't Adam Peters fill in the blank this offseason?
All right, Kevin, what's good in the hood, man?
What's good in the hood, Ross?
Now, I'm going to say real quick before I get to Adam Peters, if I came off as self-serving yesterday calling in about a different team when it was a good day for Wizards fans, I do apologize.
Stop. I wanted you to clear it up that who you were talking about so everybody understood. It's fine.
All right, bet. Cool. All right, man. Well, my thunder was throwing a little bit. I was thinking maybe center, but then I was like, maybe they could have did better with receiver. But I'm going to go with DB. Now, I know they were limited with draft picks. So DB, I was just looking at some games last night, man, and I feel like how they bolstered the defensive line, they could have did a little bit of a better job. Give me a cornerback. Because that's the tree that Peters comes from. He's good at finding those hidden gems, deeper in the draft. But when you lack capital, you only have so many picks to go with, and there was not a single pick that they made that I scratched my head with. I really think if the center that went to Cleveland was available, one pick before the defensive end, Brailsford, he'd be there. But yeah, I'm ready to use this nickname for a group of cornerbacks and call them the Island Boys. I'm hoping it's with Sanders still and Amos, but that's the one nitpick I can pick. But it was a reach for a nitpick because they had little capital. But if I had to say it, it was they could have had more depth at the cornerback position.
Well, they had the capital. They had the capital. The issue was, in free agency, the cornerback position. I mean, it was, for this particular year, I'm trying to think. The guy, Jamel Dean, got some money. Tariq Woolen got some money. They signed, Washington signed Amik Robertson. Who else got money? I got to look that up. Who else got money in free agency at corner? We had the big trade, obviously, with Kansas City and the Rams. Alontae Taylor got the biggest deal, 3 years, $58 million for corners. So, wasn't the best year for corners in free agency. It wasn't. And look, if Trey Amos is what, say, Sean Springs thinks he is, Sean Springs, Fred Smoot, the guys that played the position, they think Trey Amos is the real deal. They know what one looks like. They think he's the real deal. Got injured on a bad defense last year. Let's see what guys like him and Sanders still, let's see what they look like with a better front seven and a better pass rush. If you're on hold, stay there. Why didn't Adam Peters in the offseason fill in the blank? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. 2026 season will be here before we know it, but we still have, a solid 4 months, close to it, of offseason left. The training camp preseason period is still technically off-season edition time leading into real games. I think Washington will make another edition, and I do think it'll be Brandon Ayuk. I do. The question is, when can they get him? When will San Francisco choose to release him? My question to all of you right now at 301-230-0980 is, why, I want you to fill in the blank, why didn't Adam Peters during this offseason do the following? Fill in the blank. I gave the answer, why didn't Adam Peters just go all in on Tyler Linderbaum? It's not even the need for the position. It was that he is a very, very good player, like a high-level interior offensive lineman who plays center. He got $27 million a year from the Raiders. That was probably $5 to $6 million more than projected. But Washington had the cap space. And to add an elite level player to at least one other elite level player along your offensive line, Laramie Tunsil, and another very good player in Sam Cosmi, that would have been, to me, something that would have made sense. You would have been adding an elite level player at a position of need, and at the same time, maybe you overpaid the market by a little bit, but they kind of did that with a player that they really fell in love with last year in Javon Kinlaw. This would have been a position that really is investable, whenever you're investing in offensive linemen. And I would have viewed Tyler Linderbaum's investment as an investment in great players on your roster and another great player along your offensive line who just happens to play center. 301-230-0980. Let's go to our guy, Lap in D.C. Why didn't Adam Peters in the offseason, and then fill in the blank, Lap?
Well, I was going to say wide receiver, but I guess you answered it with the Brandon Ayuk thing. I'm going to say corner, man. I really, in the draft, because I just had a feeling we wasn't going to get Love or Tate. I'm sold on Sonny Styles. I'm starting to he's growing on me now. I just didn't think he was going to be there, honestly. But I wanted the corner from LSU. And I know he took a shot at us in the press conference too. But, yeah, I just think they needed to address the corner position. So hopefully they do it. And it's not the end of making some more moves, because we need all the talent we can to help, the team. We definitely need some depth because we had a lot of injuries last year. So we'll see what happens, man. But, yeah, I just want them to get what we need so we can be competitive and successful next year. Yep.
I mean, there is always the possibility that an offseason can fill every single need you have. But when you're a team like Washington, who had so many needs heading into this offseason, if I told you had to swap out a corner with one of the pass rushers they added, would you have done that? I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of Oweh. I think they could be catching him ascending into a prime stretch of his career where he becomes a high-level pass rusher, and maybe even more than that. I'm a big fan of what they did with Chenal and with Chason, and really with Nick Cross too. I mean, you're right. I mean, we're going to come back at corner right now as it stands, and more likely it will stand this way with Trey Amos, Mikey Sanderstill, and Amik Robertson, as the corners. Will they put more safeties on the field? Safeties that can cover in nickel. That's a possibility. Certainly with, Reeves, with Quan Martin. They like Quan Martin and they like Reeves. We'll see what Tyler Owens turns out to be, because there was some talk from Durante Jones about Tyler Owens and his athleticism. we don't know what it's going to look like, and we don't know what the preference of the new defensive coordinator will be. But I'm glad in their front seven, on paper anyway, they added faster and better. Let's go to Abdul in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Abdul, why didn't Adam Peters fill in the blank?
All right. Hey, what's up, Kevin? And yeah, I'm actually in Lancaster, California. I don't know why people think
well,
Pennsylvania.
Lancaster is the way you pronounce it for Pennsylvania. I know that.
Got you. Yeah, no, I got you. No doubt. So, yeah, I think why didn't they go after Tyreek Woolen? 6'4", ran a 4.26. We needed an outside boundary corner, and I just felt like that's something that should have addressed.
Yeah, I mean, there were, I guess, possibilities. It wasn't the greatest corner opportunity in free agency. By the way, real quickly, and I noticed this during the break, do you know that Tyler Biotish got the second biggest deal in free agency? Now, he got it before free agency began because Washington cut him loose. And so he signed with the Chargers before. But his 3-year, $30 million deal in aggregate was the second biggest deal to Linderbaum's deal. Of course, Linderbaum's deal was much bigger. But yeah, I mean, I remember talking a little bit about Dean from Tampa as a possibility. He ended up signing in Pittsburgh, 3 years, $36 million, basically $12 million a year. Woolen got a 1-year, $12 million deal. He's in Philly. Yeah, there were a couple of guys, but nobody that was like, big time pursuable. Alontae Taylor got the biggest deal going from New Orleans to Tennessee. He got basically 19.3 per year for 3 years. So could they have done something? Yeah. Yep, they could have. They signed Amik Robertson. They liked him. Their, analytics people I know really liked Amik Robertson, and they see him as a guy that can really fill a specific role as their nickel corner. We'll see if that turns out well. Let's go to Robert in Annapolis. Robert, why didn't Adam Peters during this offseason fill in the blank?
Good morning. Well, with so many needs and only 6 draft picks, minor point or possibility really, but with the 7th pick or the 7th round pick, why not pick a player that might potentially contribute this year rather than a quarterback that probably just be holding the clipboard during summer camp? They could hit maybe a Cameron Curl. I know it's a long shot, but
yeah,
in light of their needs, and you never know. You pick a guy years ago. You had a player Horton. Remember, he was a coach for the Ravens until he got that sesamoid.
Until
he got that sesamoid.
Yeah, the sesamoid injury.
And Albert
I hear you. That's not unfair. I think that at some point they're hoping that Marcus Mariota could be the backup quarterback here for a while if he wants to live on the East Coast, and I think there's some thought that eventually he'd like to move back to the West Coast and be closer to Hawaii. But that's not unfair. It's a small nit to pick, but they only had 6 picks, and to take a player in the 7th round that is very unlikely to ever see the field for the franchise, that's not totally unfair. I think the interesting thing is he went before Garrett Nussmeier, who this time last year was a projected top 5 pick in the draft overall.
Or they could have packaged it in a trade maybe with another pick to move up a little bit. But I just didn't think that pick was well used. There you go. That's it.
Okay. Billy and Chantilly, why didn't Adam Peters during this offseason, and then fill in the blank?
Got to just spend more money. I mean, you got $45 million of cap space available here. So you got to bring in some players.
Well, they did.
How about Joey Bosa?
They brought in the most.
Like a player.
You and I've done this already. They were the biggest. They were the 3rd biggest spender in aggregate dollars, and they added the most new players to their roster of any team in the league. So I get it. They have more to spend, but it's not like they were cheap. It's not like they weren't active. I guess the John Wooden line, don't, confuse activity with productivity. But Washington added more new players to their roster than any team in the league, and they were the third highest spender in free agency. Billy, did I lose
Clowney.
you?
I'll take him. Clowney, take him. Put him on the roster.
You want
third and long.
Clowney?
Fact.
You just want to spend for the sake of spending. Look, they could have ended up the top spender had they gotten Pierce. Had they gotten Pierce or had they signed Linderbaum. Linderbaum's the one player that I hope at some point during the season they don't and we don't regret that they just didn't go all in and just beat the Raiders' offer. Now, maybe Linderbaum didn't want to live on the East Coast, didn't want to live in the Baltimore, D.C., region. Who knows? But Washington, backed off when the money got crazy. And it's one of those things where if you're going to overspend for an elite level player, which Tyler Linderbaum is. Thank you, Billy in Chantilly. That's the one. Look, they're not done. They're going to add a receiver. I feel confident in that. I'd be shocked if this is their receiver room when we get to opening day, September 13th, which it now looks like September 13th at some point in the afternoon, 1 o'clock or 4:25 will be their opener because they're not the Sunday night game and they're not the Monday night game. And we know they're not the Wednesday game against Seattle or the Thursday night game in Australia. But I think Brandon Ayuk's going to be on this roster. I do. And the only issue and the thing that we will argue about a lot as we get into the summer, if he's not on that roster at the beginning of training camp, many of you are going to say, just sign Diggs, just sign Keenan Allen, just sign, another veteran receiver that's out there, or don't sign anybody. Let's roll with it. And you aren't going to feel good about adding Brandon Ayuk midway through training camp or when training camp is over. And I'll understand that position, even though Jay Gruden told me recently, you could add him on September 1st and he'll be fine. He comes out of the Kyle Shanahan offense. There's a good fit, and it won't take him long to be up to speed if physically, he's, up to speed. All right, when we come back, I want to talk about LeBron James, who very possibly could have played his final game of his career. 23 years. A very disappointing Game 4 loss, but not unexpected, going out in a sweep at the hands of Oklahoma City. But what if 41-year-old LeBron decides that this is it? I don't think he will, but what if he does? What will we think of LeBron's career? Somebody wrote about it and said, essentially, he's had 4 Hall of Fame careers wrapped up into one. I'll explain when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
And yeah, but that was the first thing the biggest thing that I think changed. I'm done. You want?
Rui Hachimura was at the podium when LeBron walked in after the Lakers lost last night to Oklahoma City. And Rui did the right thing, realized LeBron is here. He's done. LeBron's sitting down because last night, after LeBron and the Lakers were eliminated, the question was going to be, what is your future at 41 years old? Did he play his final game last night? 24 points, 12 rebounds in the closest game by far of their 4-game sweep loss to Oklahoma City. Here's what LeBron said about his future after he took Rui's chair, moving Rui to the side.
Well, I think you guys asked me about it, and I've answered questions. Yeah, I don't think I've come out as like, oh, retirement is coming. So, I mean, what my future, I don't know, obviously. I mean, obviously we're still fresh from, obviously losing, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future holds for me, obviously, as it stands right now tonight. I got a lot of time. I'll sit back, like I think I said it last year after we lost, I think, to Minnesota, to go back and recalibrate with my family and talk with them and spend some time with them. And then when the time comes, I obviously, you guys know what I decide to do.
LeBron James was without Luka Doncic towards the end of the season and the entire postseason. Now, I don't think they would have beaten Oklahoma City in this particular series, even with a healthy Luka throughout, even with a healthy Austin Reeves throughout. I don't. Now, the Lakers with a healthy Luka down the stretch could have finished in a different position than the position they finished in. They finished in fourth. They could have finished in third. They finished a game behind the Nuggets. And that could have put them in a first-round series with Minnesota. Had they won that series, would have been difficult, even with Luka. They'd be playing San Antonio right now, not Oklahoma City. I don't think the Lakers were good enough to advance past this round, even fully healthy. That's my opinion. But LeBron James just finished an age 41 season in which he averaged 23.2 points per game, 7.3 assists per game, and 6.7 rebounds in the postseason shorthanded. He's had an outstanding regular season where really for the first time in his career, he was probably not even the second option at times on his team. But he averaged during the regular season 20 points per game, actually close to 21 points per game. Total rebounds per game, 6.1. Total assists, 7.2 at 41 years old. Like, if you watch LeBron James play in the games, especially these meaningful games, and you had no idea that he was 41 years old, you would just say he's one of the best players on the floor, because he has been. He's been one of the best players on the floor. The question about LeBron is twofold. One, will he play again? And then two, if he does play, with whom will he play? Will he stay in LA? Will he move to Golden State to play with Steph? Could he go back to Cleveland and team up with Donovan Mitchell? Could he go to Denver and team up with Jokic? Where would he play? Can you imagine if all of a sudden the Wizards were interested in adding him to a veteran group of his former teammate and championship teammate and Anthony Davis and Trae Young? Because, look, LeBron is not going to require top-of-the-market money going into his age 42 season. That's not going to happen. He's also not going to play for the league minimum, which he shouldn't have to do, considering that he's still one of the better players in the league. I read this column during the I was replaying my interview with Randolph Childress earlier in the show from my podcast last night, and somebody sent me this story written by Tom Haberstroh, who writes for Yahoo Sports. And he made a very good, actually almost an airtight case that LeBron James's 8 years in LA, he signed, remember, with the Lakers in 2018. He played 8 seasons, or has played 8 seasons in Los Angeles. And that standalone age 34 through 41 years old stretch is a Hall of Fame career on its own. That's pretty amazing. Now, how did he go about proving it? He said, when it comes to NBA careers, Basketball Reference, which is kind of the Bible when it comes to looking up stuff about careers and statistics, NBA and ABA, by the way, the Basketball Reference determines NBA Hall of Fame careers using 5 significant factors: All-Star game selections, NBA top 10 leaderboard appearances in the following categories: points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, minutes played, NBA championships, NBA peak win shares. That is an advanced metric that estimates the number of wins a player contributes to his team based on, box score statistics. Also, believe it or not, height ends up being a big part of Hall of Fame conversations. I didn't know this, that research shows the shorter you are, the better chance you have with Hall of Fame statistics of reaching the Hall of Fame. Anyway, with the Lakers, LeBron has been top 10 in points. He was 8th in 2019-2020. He was first. He led the league in assists in 2019-2020. Of course, that was COVID and ended up being the title that they won in the bubble during July, August of the summer of 2020. He was also 6th in assists in 23-24, 7th in assists in 24-25. So top 10 points, assists. He's got a title with the Lakers. In 8 years in LA, he's got 8 All-Star appearances. And the peak win share rate in which came during that championship season, 2019-2020, he registered a very impressive 9.8 number. Basically, the career that he has had just in LA, age 34 through 41, compared to other Hall of Fame careers, would be a lock Hall of Fame career as a standalone. 8 All-Star appearances, a title, peak share at 9.8, which is a very high number, top 10 in categories, including first in assists in 2020. In terms of his MVP numbers, he was second in the running in 2020. He's been in the top 10 2 other times in the MVP voting. He, has been an NBA all team. He was third team in 2019, first team in 2020, second team in 2021, third team in 2022, third team in 23, third team in 24, second team in 25. We haven't seen that team this year, but he was an all-star this year. That's pretty amazing. And then when you consider the other 3 stints, the original Cleveland stint, then the 4-year stint in Miami, and the 4-year stint in Cleveland round 2, those careers, while super short, are actually borderline standalone Hall of Fame careers as well. I mean, LeBron won in Cleveland the first go round, 2 MVPs, 2, a defensive player of the year, a rookie of the year. The team results weren't as good. They made one NBA Finals in that first stint. Then you go to Miami, where he won another 2 MVPs and won 2 titles in 4 years. Then you go to Cleveland, where he was an MVP runner-up once, was an NBA first-team all-team player 4 times, all 4 years in Cleveland. He was NBA first-team honors. And they won a title there. First, title for Cleveland in franchise history. First title for Cleveland since 1964 in the city when they won it in 2016. And then I just gave you the Laker career. I mean, I don't personally think LeBron's going to give it up. He's playing too well. He absolutely has earned the right. No one's played a 41-year age season like LeBron just played. Nobody. LeBron absolutely has earned the right from an actual result standpoint to come back and play another season. He will be a tremendous addition to a lot of teams, not as a number 1 player, but as a number 2 or best case, if he wants to win a title as the 3rd option on a team. I think he's coming back. Now, if he doesn't, this is the question that sports fans debate all the time, and it's the perfect day to do it because as of now, there is a chance his career is over. Again, I would not bet on that. I would bet on LeBron coming back. And if you were to tell me the team, I would bet it's with the Lakers. With Luka back next year, they were a good team playing at a super high level when Luka got hurt. I personally didn't think that they were a true championship contender in the West with San Antonio, with Oklahoma City. And at the time, I thought about Denver being a better team as well. But could he team up with somebody in the East and have a better chance? Could he team up with Brunson, and Cat and have a better chance as the 3rd option in New York? Or with Mitchell and Mobley in Cleveland? Is that a possibility? Why not think about Washington for LeBron just next year? I don't think he'd ever do it. I mean, that would be following Michael through his last stop, and it didn't go well for Michael here. That's not going to happen more likely than not, but it would be interesting to see LeBron on the floor with Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Trey Johnson, Will Riley, Bilal Coulibaly, AJ DeBonsa. I mean, what would the Wizards actually be next year if LeBron were added to the mix? Well, now you're talking about a team. Anthony Davis is still the key, but you're talking about a playoff team for sure, and then probably a top 3 to top 4 contender in the East, easily. But on a day like today, let's assume LeBron played his last game. Is he the GOAT? I just gave you, and it's a really good story, and it's totally from a quantifiable standpoint. It checks out. His standalone Laker career, 8 years, age 34 to 41, by all metrics, is a Hall of Fame career on its own. That's nuts. That this guy signed for, a few years, ended up playing 8 in LA, and the numbers he accumulated in LA as a standalone would be a Hall of Fame career. Obviously, Michael didn't do that. Magic didn't do that. You can talk about Kareem's second career, won a title in Milwaukee, but he was a young player when he joined the Lakers and played until, age 42. Cap was 42 when he retired. Kareem was. Wilt obviously had a second, career and a Hall of Fame career in LA as a Laker, but didn't play until 41 years old. I mean, as I read that this morning, I thought to myself, I've never, ever considered LeBron to be the all-time greatest. I can't and I won't. He's just not one of my all-time favorites from a personality standpoint, etc. Mike and Magic have Magic for many years was my number one, but I'll concede that Mike is my number one with Magic my number two. But considering what he's done for 8 seasons in Los Angeles, and yeah, you could put, if you want, an asterisk next to the 2020 COVID title as the one title that he won, but he's been in the Western Conference Finals another 2 times on top of that. They've been to the postseason 6 times in his 8 years. This guy just finished a postseason 23-7-6 without Luka and without Reeves for a big portion of it. They won a first-round series in these playoffs in which I didn't think they'd win the series. They were not the favorite against the Rockets going in because of their injuries, and they won the series fairly easily, 4-2. Where do you have LeBron on the all-time GOAT list? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. If LeBron played his last game last night, do you consider him the greatest of all time? 301-230-0980. A really good read. I would recommend it. Tom Haberstroh from Yahoo Sports writing that LeBron's career just in Los Angeles alone, ages 34 through 41, his 8 years in LA, is a standalone, quantifiable lock Hall of Fame career. Think about that. And think about the fact that Cleveland stint 1 was Hall of Fame worthy. Miami, it was a short stint. Cleveland version 2.0 they were short stints, but they were Hall of Fame worthy. And his Lakers 8 years so far, standalone Hall of Fame worthy. He's not the greatest of all time, though, because it's not all about numbers. See, the one thing, and this is what I've always said about LeBron, I just can't put him ahead of Michael, and I can't put him personally ahead of Magic. Michael's the all-time killer. Kobe had it. Bird had it as well. I've never felt during LeBron's entire 23-year career that I was watching somebody who absolutely despised losing the way that Michael and Kobe and Larry Bird did. Like, he just didn't have that killer gene. He certainly didn't have it for the first half of his career. That may be a little bit unfair. The first third of his career, where in those first finals in Miami against Dallas and Dirk, he was hiding in corners. I mean, that was really alarming. Now, that following year, when they were about to get eliminated by Boston in 2012, right? 2012, Game 6, down 3-2, the 45, 15 and 10 or whatever it was. That was his first delivery in a big spot, and he was incredible that night. And now he's had so many of those nights since. But Michael was out of the womb a killer. Kobe, the same thing. Larry, the same thing. Magic, for me, is truly one of the all-time game changers we had never seen, ever, in 1980. A 6'9" passing genius point guard. And his performance in Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals at the Spectrum against Philadelphia with no Kareem is an all-time playoff performance. I was also just the biggest Magic fan. I was. But LeBron's number 3 for me. Mike, Magic, LeBron, and I think Wilt's numbers are so outrageous. They're so otherworldly. We've talked about this many times before, what Wilt did, averaging 50 and 25. Are you kidding me? The numbers he put up are so outrageous. They're the biggest outliers in the history of team sports in terms of the 4 major sports. There's never been a player statistically that was so much different than every other player in their sport like Wilt was in the NBA. So I've got Wilt 4. Then I've got Russell, Kareem, Larry, Kobe, Olajuwon I've always had higher than most, and Shaq. That's my top 10. Duncan, Steph, Oscar, Barkley, Durant. We can start talking about that next tranche, but Steph's close to my top 10 for sure. But LeBron's not the GOAT, despite having essentially 4 different standalone Hall of Fame careers, which is remarkable. And he's not done yet. That's the thing. When you average 23-7-6 and 23-7-7 basically in the postseason without your best player on the team, they won a series they weren't supposed to win. They got blown out by OKC, but OKC might do that the rest of the way. We'll see. Series against San Antonio would certainly be interesting. The question, if he played his last game, did we just witness the final game of the greatest of all time? I say no. What do you say, Curtis? Go ahead. Thanks for holding.
Good. How you doing, Kevin? No, he's not the greatest. The Lakers win last night. We felt like they won last night. Yeah,
he got one of the greatest. He's one of the
Well, no, they didn't win
time,
last night. They got eliminated last night.
I know. I'm saying people act like they won last night, like they won a
Oh, right.
championship. LeBron all day. Yes, he won the greatest all time, but they talk about he won this and that. He also don't play no defense, and he still stands in
Oh,
the
come on.
corner
LeBron's
and
been a
shot.
great defender during the course of his career. He has not been as great of a defender as an older player, but come on, that's to be expected. You're not going to be as great of a defender at 40, 41, especially given the responsibilities he had on the offensive side of the court in this postseason.
Okay, but y'all keep talking about this and that. How many times he's so great? Why he keep getting how many times he keep getting swept? Nobody.
Well, when you're in the playoffs as many times as he's been, there are going to be a lot of results that end up being higher than usual. Magic got. What'd you say? Go ahead.
He played 22 a year in this week schedule. You know for a fact in the East, he played this week schedule. I ain't taking away from LeBron James, but it's not even close. It's Jordan, Bird, Magic, and Elijah Wan. I mean, he got great stats. He even played 20-some years, but let's not keep Cam parade for him. I mean, every time, but when nobody calls him out, he don't score. When he scored 10 points the other night, and I ain't see nobody. But every time you have a bad game, he's 41.
You're kind of where I used to be, but I can't even do it anymore. I can't even fake like he's not in the conversation anymore because he's in the conversation. You don't like him. I get it. There have been times over the course of his career where I haven't been fond of him. I think there's a bit of a phoniness to him. But in terms of what he's been able to do as a basketball player, it is all-time GOAT consideration. I don't have him as the GOAT, but it's not crazy to consider him as such. Thanks, Curtis. Let's go to Cam in Largo. Cam, go ahead.
Hey, how we doing today? Appreciate you taking my call, having me on.
Sure, Cam.
Love the show.
Thanks.
This is the one thing. Well, there's a couple of things I'll say. I think, especially in radio and on TV, there's a lot of older cats on TV. Stephen A. Even the guy who just called in. They're saying that LeBron doesn't play any defense. LeBron is 6-time first-team All-NBA defense.
No, I would never. Yeah, LeBron's been a great defender.
He is top. He's number one in points. He's number one in minutes played. And that's not simply because of, we need to use him. No, he's simply the best player out on the court, period. Now, when you talk about a lot of these other players, I would be very interested to see how many Hall of Fame that those guys played with. I would be willing to bet.
You're breaking up a little, Cam. You're breaking up a little, Cam. So I need to move on, but I do think that there is a generational aspect to this conversation. That movie Bad Teacher with Jason Segel and what's her face, Cameron Diaz, where he's in the cafeteria with the kids. He's a PE teacher, and they're arguing LeBron versus Michael, and the kid says, 6 championships, right? 6 championships. That's the only argument you have. And Jason Segel says, that's the only argument I need. Mike's got 6. LeBron's got 4. Mike's got 6. Look, I can't put LeBron in that Mike category. And it's not even about the championships for me. It's about Mike was the all-time killer, the all-time competitor. Kobe was the same way. Bird was the same thing. Look, LeBron's style was more Magic than it ever was Michael. LeBron's IQ is all-time, maybe all-time GOAT. Second to Magic. And maybe third to Magic and Bird. All right. In my lifetime, anyway. I can't go back to Oscar. I can't go back to Cousy. I can't go back to, Baylor, and I can't go back to Russell. Okay. But in my lifetime, in terms of true high IQ combined with talent, it's Magic, Bird, and LeBron. But LeBron never had that killer competitive gene that Mike had. But there is a generational aspect to the conversation, no doubt. as there was with Mike versus Magic, as there was with, Magic and Bird versus Oscar. Chet and Silver Spring. We may have watched LeBron James's last game last night. Do you think he's the GOAT? Chet, you there?
Who do you think? Yeah, I'm here.
I got
I'm
you
here.
now. Go ahead.
Can you hear
Start
me?
over. Start over. Go ahead.
Yeah. Who do you think's the greatest hockey player ever?
Well, I'm not a hockey guy, but I would assume Gretzky.
No, but okay. Did he have that killer instinct? He was pretty passive, wasn't he?
I don't know. I can't speak intelligently about hockey.
So my point is, it's not a 1-for-1. LeBron brings his own element, his own physical, mental element to the game, and he's been super successful. It's interesting. Steve Kerr was in an interview last week and said LeBron is the greatest athlete he's ever seen, which is a pretty big statement because you're taking Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders out of the equation with that.
Right.
And I do think it is a generational thing that, I took my daughter to the Orioles game last week and she saw a guy sitting in front of us with a Ripken shirt on. She's like, who's Ripken? So, I think kids who've grown up to LeBron see LeBron and think he's the GOAT, right? Physical, he can play any position on the court. Michael couldn't do that. So I don't know if it's ever going to be settled as who's the greatest, but he's certainly right in there. And hell of a career for sure.
By the way, the great, I didn't hear Kerr say that about him being the greatest athlete that's ever played, I'm assuming, team sports. He's certainly in the conversation of that, but I don't think I would put him in that category necessarily. In the NBA alone, in terms of the greatest, true athleticism on the court, like I'd consider people like Dominique Wilkins, Sean Kemp. There are a few others. Michael, certainly from an athleticism standpoint, was off the charts. That wasn't Magic's game. That wasn't Bird's game. Understood. But that's a separate conversation than the greatest player. But yes, there is definitely a generational aspect to it. And I don't know if Gretzky was passive. I certainly would never describe LeBron as passive. I would describe LeBron in moments that were very troubling early in his career as passive, but after 23 years of LeBron, that would not be the description. I would just say that he didn't have that absolute fierce killer gene that Kobe, Mike, and Larry Bird had. Paulie, go ahead.
Hell to the W, man. Hey, Don't forget my boy Bubba Chuck, man. Allen Iverson.
Right.
He definitely had that killer gene, man.
He did.
But look.
But we're not putting him in that conversation. I
don't know why we can't.
Well,
because
he's not. Nothing would match up with any of the players we're talking about, including he never won a title.
That's about it, man. But you wouldn't say he's not in that category.
I think if we did a greatest of 6'1" and under, he's obviously in the conversation.
Bro, he was unstoppable.
He was great.
Look at his career play.
I loved him. I loved watching him. But LeBron, GOAT or not?
LeBron, he's the GOAT of his time. Of his era, he's the GOAT. Hands down, he was the greatest player.
Okay, well, that's obvious. That's obvious. There's no competition.
But of all time is Mike, man. You put their prime years, compare their prime years, Mike was just on another level than him. And he's damn good. I'm not slighting him or none of that. I'm just saying he's not the GOAT of all time. But look for him to sign a 2-year deal. He's going to chase this ring. I think he's going to sit back and see what the Lakers do, because the Lakers got to bring some players in. And I think he'll sit back, see what they're going to do, see where he fit in. If he don't fit in, I think he's going to go to another team that has a chance at a championship, because he's still a very effective player with his old man game, and he's still a leader. So 2-year deal, he's going to chase that ring, and then he'll get smell his own roses tour in that last season, man.
That's by the way, you just nailed the reason for I don't think last night was his last game. He's going to demand the pomp and circumstance of a final, farewell season, city to city.
As he should, though. As he should.
Yeah, it's fine.
As he should.
It's fine. Thank you.
GOAT.
All of the well, Isaiah's right there with Iverson, by the way, in the smaller player GOAT conversation. I mean, I would say it's one or the other. If we're what are we looking at? Six. What was Iverson? 6'1"? Is Paulie still on there?
No, he dropped.
So if we just do the 6'1" and under, it's either Iverson or Isaiah. Am I forgetting somebody? I don't think I am. That's it for the show today. Chris is next.